and good evening to Gustavus Adolphus College. My name is Amy Pearson, and I'm the director of our Community Engagement Center here at Gustavus. And also, I'm co-director of our Gusties voter engagement team here as well. That happens every 2 years. Our voter engagement team is comprised of myself and also the assistant vice president for student life. And then we gather some folks from across campus, including students that help us really encourage our Gustavus students to get registered to vote and then get out and vote, whether that's here in St. Peter in Nicollet County or whether it's wherever they are at home, here in Minnesota or across the country. So our efforts are all nonpartisan, but it really is a matter of getting students educated and getting them aware of who is on their ballot, again, whatever ballot that is, and then getting them out to vote. I was telling somebody earlier that we do have a little bit of a competition with St. Olaf. St. Olaf beat us out 2 years ago for registration and for actual voter participation. So we're really trying to beef up that, get those students out to register. So tonight we have invited the 2 candidates for Nicollet County Sheriff to join us. And part of that reason that we decided to bring Mark and Dave here was because I think some of our students don't necessarily understand what the role of the sheriff is in a county. And so we're excited to have them tell us a little bit about what they do and what they hope to do after November. So tonight's conversation is being moderated by one of our faculty members, Kate Knudsen from our political science department. So thank you, Kate, for doing this. And we have provided some of the questions to the candidates prior to tonight, so they kind of know what's coming a little bit. But at the end of their conversation, we encourage you all, and I'll bring a microphone that might work around to have you talk as well. So again, thank you to Mark and Dave for coming tonight, and we appreciate your time and your attention to the work here in Nicollet County. Kate, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks everyone for being here tonight. So here's the format. I've got 6 questions that were created mostly through the students who were involved in the student engagement team that Amy mentioned there. So we're gonna start with those, and I'm gonna be a strict timekeeper and ask each of the candidates to restrict their comments on each question to 3 minutes or less. And so that takes us through about 35 to 36 minutes, which leaves us about 15 to 20 minutes for questions from the audience. So hopefully you'll learn a lot from the first part and then have an opportunity to ask your own questions. So we're going to start with the first question to investigator Mark Chatterton. And we're gonna just start with a brief introduction of the candidates. So I'm gonna ask in 3 minutes or less if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, what's your background in law enforcement, and how does that influence why you want to be sheriff?
I'd like to thank you guys for showing up tonight, as well as Amy Pearson and the voter engagement team at Gustavus for having this event. I started out going to MSU, Mankato State. I got a 4-year degree at Mankato State University, and after graduating, I ended up working in Lee Center at the police department, Leesburg County Sheriff's Office, and was the chief of Cleveland before coming to Nicollet County. While I was in high school, I joined the Minnesota Army National Guard and served 6 years here in St. Peter, 4 years active, 2 years inactive. And when I started in law enforcement, when you're new, it's all nights and weekends, and that didn't go along very well with nights and weekend drills in the National Guard, so I got out of that. I served as a jailer dispatcher for a brief period of time at the Sheriff's Department here in Nicollet County, and then 12 years I was a patrol deputy and have been in investigations for 16 years. I've lived in Nicollet for nearly 30 years. I've had 3 houses, all within 1 mile, so I didn't travel far. I was the mayor of Nicollet for 3 years before moving out of town into the county, and had children and wanted them to grow up in the county where they could ride 4-wheeler and motorcycle and not bother the neighbors. So when that opportunity became available, we did that. So I'm married, 4 children. My wife Betsy's a probation officer here in Nicollet County and has been a probation officer over 30 years. My oldest daughter is a special ed teacher in Burnsville. And the next oldest works for MnDOT, Ben. He's an engineering assistant. And then I have another daughter who's a nurse in California and a son that's going to the University of Minnesota hoping to be a pilot.
Great, thank you. And now we'll have Sheriff Dave Lange, who's gonna introduce himself. Did I say that right? Lang, sorry.
That's fine.
I'm not from the county. I
Yeah.
don't get to vote in this, so.
Well, then you get to learn too.
I get to learn too.
So first of all, yeah, I'd like to thank everybody, and Amy for putting this event together tonight, and for those folks that have shown up here for their interest in what we have to say. Myself, I am a lifetime resident of Nicollet County. I grew up in Nicollet County. I lived here, I'm 55, so my whole life. Grew up on a farm between here and Nicollet. I went to school in Nicollet, graduated there, and I also graduated from Mankato State University with my law enforcement degree there. Right out of school, basically, I started working at the sheriff's office when I was 18 as a jailer dispatcher. I worked there for 6 years, then moved on and went to work at North Mankato for North Mankato PD for 11 years, and then I ran for sheriff and have been your sheriff for the past 20 years. I am married to my wife Dawn, who's with us here tonight. We've been married for 37 years. I have 3 adult children. 2 of them kind of followed my footsteps. One's a firefighter for the U.S. Forestry. The other one, my daughter, is a probation agent up in Walker, Minnesota. And then my oldest son is a program manager for a business up in the cities. I've been a Lions member, which is a service organization, for 19 years in Nicollet. Been a DNR youth firearms instructor, and I've also organized the Special Olympics polar plunge in St. Peter for the last 16 years, in which we've raised over $1.2 million. And that's the rundown on me.
All right, well, we'll start, I'll let you hold on to that again, Sheriff Lang. So many people might not be familiar with the Sheriff's Office and the role of the Sheriff's Office in the county and what the county sheriff even does. So to help us better understand that, I'm wondering if you can tell us what you see as the 3 most important functions of the Sheriff's Office.
Sure. The Sheriff's Office basically is responsible for public safety law enforcement services in the rural part of the county. We also provide those services to the smaller communities that do not have their own police departments. Like St. Peter and North Mankato, they choose to have their own police department, so those police departments are responsible for the basic public safety services of those cities. The Sheriff's Office, 3 most important parts for us is obviously our patrol, which does the patrolling to mitigate, traffic laws and crime and things like that, respond to calls. Then the other side of it is the jail. The Sheriff's Office also runs the jail for the county, which basically houses everybody that's arrested in our facility. It's not our job to punish them, but we are there to see them through the court process, and if they get sentenced to serve time, they do that in the county jail up to 365 days. Anything more than that they go up to state prison. Then also the Sheriff's Office, our office runs the County 911 Dispatch Center, which answers all the 911 calls for the county, including the cities of North Mankato and St. Peter. And then I'll add too that those other police departments that are in the county, they don't have a jail, so anybody that they arrest comes to our facility as well.
Great. Same question for you, Mark. What do you see as the 3 most important functions of the Sheriff's Office?
Well, I agree with everything that Dave just said. Those are the 3 main functions of every sheriff's office, and for the most part, police department, other than the jail. And some of them do have their own dispatch centers, and some have to swap over where we dispatch for them in the evening. So those are our main functions and very important functions. Other things that I think we're responsible for and should be doing is community outreach. I believe that we should be reaching out to many different communities within our county more often than we currently are. I think another function of the Sheriff's Department we have boat and water, we have a lot of other things that every county is responsible for: patrolling, responding to drownings, responding to all deaths. There's a lot of responsibilities that necessarily the police department don't have to, that the Sheriff's Office is responsible for. So it's hard to narrow it down to just 3. because we work with all the municipalities on those. So we might be responsible for the individual who's passed away, but their agency may be the one who's doing the investigation on the overdose, on the car accident, whatever that may be. But those are the things that Dave said are our main functions of the Sheriff's Department.
All right, so you get the next question here. The students want to know, what is your favorite part of living and working in Nicollet County?
Well, the traffic isn't too bad. We're not up in the cities where we're in a traffic jam. I like that we are a small community. I like that you know everybody, or most everybody. It's also easier to be in law enforcement because we know most of the people that are involved in criminal activity. At least over time, we get to know that, who they are. We get to know who our professionals that we work with in mental health. Because we're dealing with the same hospitals and the same staff, which are also smaller. So those are huge benefits for us to be able to do our job, effectively. And I also like that, we don't have as much room for promotion in a small department, but we work with the same individuals, and really titles shouldn't matter, because as small as we are, we all have to be there and get the job done. And when you have good people, the people in the county like law enforcement. We're fortunate. We don't have the reputation of a Minneapolis or some of the bigger agencies. People here after George Floyd were dropping off cookies and baked goods. Many deputies who went through restaurants had their meals paid for them, and people were telling them that they're appreciative of their job. That's why I love working here. I chose to stay here, and I haven't moved far. I didn't have children or family when I came here, and now my kids are growing up and have moved on, and it's allowed me time to go out and run for sheriff and do this job, which takes a lot of time. So that's the main reasons why I enjoy living in a small community in Nicollet County.
Thank you. Sheriff Lang, same question to you. What do you enjoy about, or what is your favorite part of living and working in Nicollet County?
Well, I too like the rural part. I have a son that lives up in Robbinsdale, and I don't really care for the traffic up there either. So it's nice to work in a community that you know a lot of the people that you serve. And those people that you serve, they appreciate knowing you in this role as well, along with our deputies. A lot of them live in the county, and their kids go to school in the county. So we interact with, the people that we serve in our community, and that's what I really enjoy about working in the community that I grew up in. And my ultimate goal is to provide a safe and prosperous community for everybody to enjoy. We do work close with our other law enforcement agencies. I have deputies that, I have worked for the PD, they've come to my office, and I have deputies that have gone to some of those other police departments. And we do have a pretty good bond. And we work closely with the other emergency responders in the county. The fire departments are a big integral part of what we do out there as far as traffic crashes, fires, and different incidents like that. And we have to have good working relations with them as well.
Fantastic. Okay. Sheriff Lang, this question goes to you. What are 2 to 3 crime-related issues Nicollet County faces, and how do they affect college students?
Well, just like a lot of the other cities in our area, the big discussion or increase in the prescription drug medication problems, where fentanyl-laced prescription meds kids are buying nowadays, and they don't know what they're getting. Those are something that we are actively working with through our drug task force. I have a deputy that's solely assigned to the drug task force, and there's a number of agencies that are involved in that drug task force with officers from their agencies that is their sole job is to investigate these crimes. And I guess from my perspective, the more that we can do to educate the kids that, if it doesn't come from their prescription bottle, things you buy off of the street, you cannot trust what you're getting. So that's one thing there. And certainly in the last couple of years, we've noticed too increase in aggressive driving and other bad driving habits out there. People just don't seem to care anymore. So through that, having active enforcement through our deputies, I think that we can try to mitigate those aggressive drivers and hopefully educate the public so that everybody is respectful for everybody on the roads again.
Thank you. Mark, 2 to 3 crime-related issues Nicollet County is facing and how they might affect college students.
And I agree, drugs. 1,284 people died in Minnesota last year, drug overdose. 4,000 people presented at Minnesota ERs for overdosing. Okay, put that in perspective, 500 people died last year on Minnesota highways. There was 570 gunshot deaths in the state of Minnesota, 164 homicides, okay? Drugs is our worst problem. And drugs relates to Gustavus students having the catalytic converters cut off their cars while in the parking lot. Drugs relates to burglaries. Drugs relate to many of the crimes that we deal with, and many of the same people over and over again. But when you say we have, and it's not a metro thing, of the 1,284 that died in Minnesota, almost 500 were from greater Minnesota. The higher percentage of overdoses is taking place in greater Minnesota. So when methamphetamine started, they start on the coast and they work their way to the Midwest. We know it's coming. Okay, it might take 6 months or a year, and then it hits the larger metropolitan areas, and then it hits greater Minnesota. And here we are. And I can predict now, in Mankato, you've seen the violence, you've seen what's going on, and we're being reactive. Reactive does not work. Okay, people overdose, we go pick up the deceased, we try to find who sold them the drugs. We do have a drug task force, but there's 4 agents for 5 counties. There's many weeks they're not even in our county. 4 agents for 5 counties is not enough. Okay, we have way more deputies that are out writing tickets for seatbelts and doing that, which is important. Traffic safety is important. Okay, but we're losing 1/3 of the people to traffic-related deaths, and we have the state patrol that are assisting with that. Okay, drugs in our community, in our high schools, and yes, we do need to be involved in our high schools. We need to be involved in our colleges, and I'm sure if you ask many of our college students, we have not been up here. The sheriff's office has not. We do not have a presence at Gustavus, South Central. We do a little bit, but not a whole lot with our high schools, and we need to be. And not that we can prevent it all, but we need to keep people that are selling these poisons. They need to be in prison, not in a program, because many of them are coming into our jail and being released right away. A lot of times before they're even sober. And so you say, well, yes, we're the sheriff's office, we arrest them, but we need to make public what is taking place. And it's simple. We arrest them, the county attorney's office charges them, and a lot of times the judge is releasing them. And not that, we just need to print the facts. We need to tell the people, this is what's taking place. The Honorable Judge Westfall is releasing individuals, or the Honorable Judge Grable, and we're doing press releases saying they're arrested for possession of these drugs and they're facing years in jail. Well, that's not true. It's very, very hard to send somebody to prison because they don't want to believe anybody is a criminal or committing these heinous crimes, which they are. Thank you. You just have to kick me if I'm too loud.
Oh, you're good, you're good. All right. This might transition well into what you're saying. What are your top 2 to 3 primary goals if you're to be elected sheriff, and what kinds of changes might you implement?
One of the things is transparency. Okay, there's transparency, yes, our books are published, so you know what our budget is. While we can argue on whether or not everything in the budget is what the line items are and what where them dollars are going or what was spent on. But there's also informational transparency. You should know what's going on in the community. And whether that's somebody walking away or escaping from the state hospital is a big topic here at Gustavus or in St. Peter. And if it's a problem for the state hospital and notifying us or the St. Peter Police Department that someone's gone, I think the public should know that. I think we should be disclosing it. And we can say if they're, hey, they're not somebody who jumped over a fence or broke out, but they're just a failed to return to campus, fine. But I think the public should know that and be aware of that. I think we need to be working with Gustavus. Right now, another big topic is active shooter. Active shooter in schools. The first school shooting in 1999 1989 was in Columbine, but that wasn't the first school shooting. It was in 1997, right up the road in Leesore, Minnesota. Okay, where a kid brought a gun to school and the cops chased him in and Officer Nelson was shot in the head. Okay, we need to be doing active shooter training. Officers should be familiar with every educational institution in our county, including the colleges and every high school. How to get in the building, be familiar where locker rooms are, be familiar when the kids aren't in school in the summer. We should be training with our fire departments. There should be a protocol and procedure in place that, okay, if there's this incident takes place at Gustavus, where's the fire department staging? Where is EMS? St. Peter may be the primary agency. What does the sheriff's office do? What does the state patrol do? And dispatch can give that information out. We can't come and just show up on campus and then waiting for somebody to take charge. And it would be a different plan for each school, and it should be in place. The last one that took place in Texas was 14,000 people. The same place, the same size as St. Peter, North Mankato. And they had a terrible response. And it was a lack of being prepared, and it was a lack of training.
Right, Sheriff Lang, same question to you. What are your top 2 to 3 primary goals if reelected as sheriff, and what changes, if any, would you implement?
Well, one of the main goals, obviously, as sheriff, is to provide a safe environment for everybody, including our kids in our schools and our residents on the county to live into. As far as, training our schools and responding to active shooters and so forth, we have, in the past couple of years, had some trainings with schools. We've presented to the schools on active shooter training, what to look for. And we do have some means in place. The schools, the school teachers and so forth, they know what to do when one of these incidents occurs. And they do practice drills on an annual basis, soft lockdowns and so forth like that. So yes, we can do better. We can always do better. It's just a matter of finding the time to do that. And as far as our responding officers, they all should become familiar with those locations as well. They all patrol around there. They have a general idea of, the layout of those facilities. Some of our officers have kids that go to those schools, so I will have to say that they should be familiar with those. As far as, also being open and honest with the public. When there are major incidents, it's always my goal to, let the public know what's going on. If it's, something that I feel the public would be benefiting from notifying them on an incident, certainly that information needs to be pushed out. And we have the means to do that. We have an emergency notification system that we can just notify people in certain areas, or we can notify the whole county. So we do have that type of notification system in place.
Right. And the last question that was prepared by the students, so that's your cue out there to start thinking about the questions that you have, is for Sheriff Lang, and that is, why should voters choose you?
Well, I've been the current chair for the past 20 years, and I feel like I have the experience. I'm hardworking, I've been fiscally responsible, and I want to continue to provide Nicollet County residents with a safe environment. And we also, will be making some changes in the future here. We're in the process of budgeting for adding body cams to become more transparent. That seems to be the going trend throughout law enforcement. We will be doing that, and I just want to continue to provide the services I have for the past 20 years.
All right, thank you. And last but not least from this portion, Mark, why should voters choose you?
Because I will provide transparency. And we just had a call 2 weeks ago in Nicollet where we did a search warrant for 2 days with 8 cops. People in the trailer park were wondering what we were doing. We took 71 guns out of a house and tens of thousands of rounds of ammunition. The people that were involved were arrested. There was no investigation that was hindered. They were charged. And without doing press releases on accidents, on serious crimes, rumors start. We need to let people know, because now people think bad things are going on. We had an accident County Road 25 from Cortland to Nicollet had a truck roll over full of silage. And we should be doing press releases. If we were in St. Peter, there was a bunch of cars involved where there was a suicide in town here in broad daylight outside in the street. What are all the cops doing there? What's going on? I know we don't like to put out there that, hey, that's a suicide, that there was a gunshot outside, and we don't like talking about that. But what was it? There was 400 people committed suicide last year. One, it's a conversation that needs to happen with suicide, and we need to be practicing that. But transparency, you'll see community outreach. I started a nonprofit in 2009 called MSCIC, Minnesota South Central Investigator Coalition. We trained thousands of officers. We spent tens of thousands of dollars bettering relations between community and law enforcement. And I had a lot of help with that, but I started that, and that's probably one of the things I'm most proud of, because that organization is going to be going on long after I retire, and will be continuing to benefit residents and training cops. We can bring in now with the resources they have tens of thousands of dollars in the bank. They can get the best speakers, whoever they want from anywhere in the United States, and bring them right here to Mankato. They have 300 to 500 officers that show up annually, and that's awesome, because normally we have to send people up to Brainerd. It costs money. You got to pay for hotel rooms, and here officers can get it right here in our own backyard. And I was the president of that for 11 years before I resigned, because I was planning for this adventure here that we're on.
All right, thank you. Okay, so Amy is in the back there. She's got a microphone, and David has a microphone on that side. So if you have any questions, we're going to give you a microphone. If you have a question for a specific candidate, let us know which candidate. Otherwise, we'll give both an opportunity to respond. Got a question
I don't
right
have
up
a
front.
question, but I would like Mark to talk about.
Can I give you a mic so we can all hear you?
I don't have a question, but I would like you, Mark, to talk about some of those presentations that you have given in Mankato, Max Lake, wherever, all the community, and some of the stuff that's been going on with what's going on with these young girls and how are they used. I think these students here need to know that. The sex trafficking.
Yes.
Sex trafficking.
So, and I will give Dave some credit for this, because he allowed, we never had any sex trafficking or prostitution enforcement prior to us receiving a grant, and we wrote a grant, and Dave allowed us, investigators from the area, to get some training and start doing sex trafficking investigations. We arrested over 100 people, like 130 people here in southern Minnesota, that were wanting to buy sex. And we got a grant through the Women's Foundation of Minnesota, and put an ad online, and as soon as we put one ad up, it was happening. People were calling wanting to buy sex from one ad on the internet. We never did one sting where nobody got arrested. We arrested as many as 10 in one shift, and we have a problem. And that hasn't continued. You have to prioritize. I mean, you can't do everything, but those investigations should be happening, because people are buying sex in Nicollet County every day. And I know that, because every sting we did, we arrested 3 to 10 people in an 8-hour shift off one ad on the internet. And we're one of many. And I've done it. I probably did 75 of them presentations. Next week, I'm doing one up north. So other professionals, the state of Minnesota did no wrong door. So to be looking for this in our colleges, in our hospitals, in probation, so that if we encounter a victim, that we can get them help and get them resources. We also help develop the only outstate protocols in the state of Minnesota, because our group was active. We were arresting more people down here than they arrested in Hennepin County. So that got some attention. In fact, they called when they had the Super Bowl here in Minnesota. NPR News called and wanted to interview me regarding prostitution in Minneapolis. And I said, you do know we're like an hour and a half away. We're not up there. But they seen all the articles and headlines regarding the work that we had did down here. And not every community wants to do that, because it makes their town look bad. But it's important it's going on. And it didn't matter if we rented a trailer house, we did it in a hotel, guys would show up. And that enforcement needs to continue. That's proactive enforcement. That's not reactive. That's going out looking for it, because we're not gonna find it. We're not gonna rescue anybody from human trafficking responding to calls.
Sheriff Lang, do you want to respond at all to that question?
I don't have much more to add, other than that was all initiated because of the grant that we had put in for it. And I believe there may be some grant dollars there left, but we just haven't had any active investigations or stings going on like that in the recent times.
All right, another question from the audience.
First of all, thank you both for your service to our county. It's greatly appreciated. Police departments are making the news a lot these days for not knowing how to de-escalate police calls and, frankly, racial profiling. So those are two huge pieces that are forefront on my mind. I'm curious, and this is for both of you, I'm curious, what are we currently doing, and are there any plans in place, training that's been had or is being planned to learn those critical skills so that we don't make the news like Minneapolis, and so that we're better community partners?
Do you want to take this first?
Sure. So, based on our post license, which we're licensed by the state of Minnesota, we have to have so many hours of training, and after a lot of those events occurred in the past couple of years, we have certain hours that we have to have implicit bias training and other pertinent trainings to the topic that you mentioned. So it's my job as sheriff to make sure that all my deputies, all my licensed staff get those trainings in once every licensing period. And then we also, at the Sheriff's Office, are a member of the Sheriff's Association throughout the state, where we get online training. All my deputies have the ability to go through online training for the Institute of Credible Leadership, and it's a leadership training that covers a lot of those racial profiling and implicit bias and different trainings like that that they can also seek out. And then there's another one through MCIT, which is our insurance carrier, called Patrol Online, that a lot of those online trainings can be had. And I require that of all my staff. There are certain trainings that the jail staff has to go through, and how to deal with, people of different races and ethnics as well.
Do you want to respond, Mark?
Sure. We did a talk with Indivisible from Gustavus, and a lot of that discussion was on this topic. Before that, I had contacted every agency in Nicollet County, all the police departments, the county attorney's office, and asked if you had received any complaints against officers, and it'd be an official complaint, they'd have to sign their name. And there wasn't one. And I thought, that's good. Not to say that if an officer stopped somebody of color, that they thought they could perceive that they were stopped because of that and it was not reported. But we haven't had any allegations that I'm aware of, and there hasn't been any that's reported or documented. Working in the county, you kind of learn de-escalation tactics, because when I started, you were the only one working. So when you're by yourself at a call with your backup might be 5 miles away, you'd rather talk, because you might not win that battle, and you call for help. And so you kind of learn de-escalation tactics and call for help. And a lot of people that go out probation, whatever, that do that, same type of thing. You'd rather talk to someone. Now there's instances where we can't go to a call right now where somebody doesn't have the cell phone out. And when they have the cell phone out, they're catching that moment in time of what took place. It's fine that they're recording, that things are being documented. There's nothing wrong with that, because a lot of times now officers are gonna have those body cams, or we have in-car cameras that are documenting those scenes. But I can tell you, of the staff that I work with there, if there was somebody who was racially profiling, stopping people that were only Hispanic or black, they would be reported. I have no doubt. That would not be tolerated. And that's one of the benefits of the smaller agencies, And, you know, they talk about good cops or there's bad cops. Well, sure, there's bad cops. There's bad teachers, there's bad doctors in every profession, but I think it's a very small minority of people. And those people need to be caught, and they don't deserve to wear a badge. And I think that's overwhelmingly down here in the police departments that I know, that it wouldn't be tolerated. But that's where we need more community engagement. We need buy-in, because the county has evolved. 20 years ago, we didn't have a large Somali population. And we need to do outreach. They need to be invited, and whether it's events that we put on, and if they don't come to that, we need to go to events that they put on. And we don't do a lot of that right now. We just don't.
All right, other questions? There's one right in the middle there, Amy.
This one's directed toward Mr. Chatterton. I saw on your campaign ad that respect for authority is trending in the wrong direction, and I'm wondering what this means, why it's important, and what you propose you do about it.
Well, I think we need to start with very young people. I mean, right now, you watch the news, and we can't have a high school football game without there being a shooting and everybody running. Go attend a basketball game and see how people treat referees. They don't respect them. Our teachers in high schools, when I went to school, there was no police officers in the school. We didn't need them. And why are we having this now? I don't know, but I think part of it's lack of family. I think lack of faith. There's a lot of things that the family nucleus has went downhill, and without father figures in families, there's been a large change in how youth treat our elderly people and people in authority. And how do you go about changing that? Well, you want to, we need to start young, and we need to have our parents involved in our schools when kids are young. I try to treat young people, and we deal with young people a lot, victims of crime. I treat them with respect. And if they're swearing or whatnot at me, I'll say, well, I'm not using that language with you, so I don't expect you to use that with me. And but it's a big problem. It's something that isn't going to be fixed overnight. But parents need to be parents. Teachers have probably one of the toughest jobs. When I see the behavior of some students and how they can still have a learning environment, well, it's not a whole class, it's a few students. And schools have to figure that out, whether or not they should be allowed in school or allowed to be in the classroom and be disruptive. But it's terrible when you go to a high school athletic event, and it's not just the kids, it's the parents. It's the parents screaming over a junior high basketball or junior high football game. And that's kind of the thing that I was talking about. And you know, all these shootings involving police officers, not one of them would have taken place if the person would have complied. The spot to argue is not on the side of the road. If a cop does something wrong, then you go through the process and file a complaint against the officer, is how you do it. But nobody, if everybody complied, okay, the side of the road isn't the spot to have an argument. It's just not. It's the most dangerous spot there is. And then when you get to the jail, you can file a complaint with that officer for how he was treated. Everything is recorded. It's safer for the individual and safer for the police officer.
Sheriff Lang, do you want to respond at all?
Well, I think his question was, you know, how we're gonna get the attitudes towards law enforcement back. That really went downhill 2 years ago when the George Floyd thing, you know, occurred and all the riots and so forth. But yeah, like Mark said, a lot of it has to do with how the kids are brought up at home now. The respect that is not there in the younger kids anymore. And we need to work with our human service agencies to help, you know, those families that are broken marriages or whatnot, help raise these kids so that they have respect for their parents and their teachers and so forth. And that's kind of how we have to try to turn things around. You know, I deliver safety materials to every school in the county every year, K through 4. Our businesses in the county donate money to pay for these materials, and I take it to the schools. It's kind of like a training manual, you know, being not to be a bully or drug safety, that type of thing. And then teachers, they can utilize that if they choose as a training manual. But it's just getting that interaction in the schools at a younger age so that, you know, they know that law enforcement, you know, we're their friends and they need to treat others with respect.
Yes, I have one quick thing on that. And the other thing with that is, in schools, there has to be consequences for your actions. Because if they don't, when you graduate high school, and now you're in the street, and you misbehave or smart off to the wrong person or whatnot, and you get arrested, then it's a shock, because there wasn't consequences when you were younger. There wasn't consequences at home, and school maybe taught or handled things without consequences. In real life, there's consequences for our actions. If we do stuff, there's consequences. And right now, instead of consequences, we're not. There's a lot of programs in place. We have good laws on the books, but we're not following a lot of them. But there has to be consequences, because that's what real life is.
Amen. Sheriff Lang, do you want to say anything in response? Okay. Other questions?
Hi, just a quick question, actually two. As far as the active shooter training, my dad has worked here at Gustavus Security for over 20 years. Just to correct the record, there has been no training in terms of campus-wide situational active shooter, so that just hasn't happened. I did confirm that with my father before I came. What would you do to have deputies up here on campus working with campus security to make sure that did happen? And then the other question that I have too is in terms of body cams. They've had body cams for almost, I think, a decade now here at Gustavus, and my father's worn them. Why hasn't the county had those for a long time too? In terms of budget, I'm pretty sure Nicollet County has a bigger budget than Security Gustavus, so those two questions.
Sheriff Lang, we'll start with you.
Sure. You know, I can't recall the year, but it was back in the Ray Thrower years when Ray was the campus security out here. We did have an active shooter training with Ray and campus security back then. So, in far as body cams, you know, I've always been reluctant. It was something that the state's pushing out that they should have these, and to be fiscally responsible, I was holding out until the state would maybe fund those body cams, because there comes a lot of expense and a lot of data management with those. Obviously, the state hasn't stepped up to the plate and said, all right, we're gonna fund those for every county or every law enforcement agency. They did it for the state patrol and the DNR this last year, but we are putting it in our budget next year to implement that program. But along with that goes a lot of management, data requests and things like that, that all have to be taken into account.
Go ahead, Mark.
The deputies are fine with having body cams, and I was a little surprised by that, but overwhelmingly, they're fine with having them. And I think they may be mandated or whatnot by the state, they're coming. And there are some issues with that procedurally and for court, and not to get in the whole mess, but if 3 of us show up at a call, we have car squad video right now. And for one of our judges, it all has to be transcribed to submit it to court. Now, if we all have 3 have body cams on, we have body cameras on the cars, and it's easy to transcribe a conversation if you and I are talking. They know, okay, Mark said this, you said that. If there's 3 or 4 of us there and we're all talking, it's almost impossible to transcribe that because you don't know who is saying what when, and it makes it a mess. This part of it that needs to be figured out. As far as the training, I've been here 28 years. The only training that's taken place up here for active shooters with our tactical team. Our tactical team take 45 minutes to an hour to be here. Frontline officers will be your first responders to any active shooter. And our majority of our staff hadn't even worked here. I don't know when that training took place, but we've done no training with Gustavus Security. When we have suspects that are in town that are cutting off catalytic converters, we should be telling Gustavus, these are potential people that are vehicles or whatnot to be on the lookout for that. Okay? But as far as coming up here on any day, on a training day, to get a tour of the school, where things are, I mean, I've been here for basketball camp when I was in high school 40 years ago, but I wouldn't know my way around either. As far as, I've been in this room one time before in my life, and yeah, I know Nicollet School because my kids went there. But as far as MPL, the St. Peter schools, I'm not familiar with them. But each school would have to have a specific plan. It wouldn't be that difficult, but it has to happen so that if a call comes out, dispatch easily grab that particular sheet and could say, okay, this is the staging area, the fire departments or whatnot. I can tell you, we had the active shooter calls that went out 2 weeks ago or a week ago. Well, guess what? I showed up down there. They couldn't get in the building. You know why? Because when they went on lockdown, the card keys for the cops don't work. Is that acceptable? No, it's not acceptable. They should know that. Had they trained and been prepared, they would know that if they go on a hard lockdown, the cops' keys don't work and they can't get in the building. Okay? That's not being prepared. That's not acceptable. Okay? A plan needs to be in place so that we know what to do. Because I can tell you what will happen. The training that we've received, the schools have received some ALICE training on what to do. But the cops that are responding have not. The police officers that are going there, basically we have one goal. You're gonna show up, find out who's doing the shooting, and try to take them out. That's the training the cops have had. Find the threat, stop the threat. And that's true, okay? But there's a lot of things that go with that. What do you do with the injured people? Where do they go? There has to be some planning and preparedness, and it hasn't taken place at Gustavus.
We're ready for our next question. We have time for probably 2 more questions.
So one issue that a lot of police officers face across the state are mental health issues, including alcoholism and PTSD. I'm wondering if you guys have any plans or programs in place upcoming that are not the bare minimum state requirement.
I missed the first part?
So a huge issue across the state with police officers is mental health related issues, including alcoholism and undiagnosed or diagnosed PTSD. And I'm wondering if you guys have any programs or plans in place that are beyond this bare minimum for the state requirements.
We don't have any set programs in place. Obviously, as the administrator, you know, I have different supervisors that check in with their staff. Like when we have a critical call, the supervisors or myself will check with the staff, you know, how they're handling it and so forth. Some critical calls we do have debriefings on. Those take place to we bring a team a critical debrief team in to talk about those incidents. And then also through the county, we have, you know, our employee wellness programs that are out there for them as well.
I would tell you that it's a gray area and that most cops won't use it. And I'll tell you why, because of my insurance or the county insurance pays for it. Cops are worried that those records can be turned over, especially if you're not at work. If you're not missing work, you're fine. But if you use sick time, you need to say, why aren't you at work? You have to bring a note. And the state has made some changes for PTSD, but honestly, cops are afraid to use it. If they use that and those records are out and now they say you're not fit for duty and I can't carry a gun, I can't do my job, and you're worried about your employment. So there's much more work that needs to be done to, and we have had trainings. We've had trainings at our law enforcement conference. We've had a lot of professional speakers come in, but you're absolutely right with alcoholism, with gambling, with a lot of addictions or whatever you want to call it, that there's more work that needs to be done.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Come up here.
I'm not sure, I thought I heard where the Attorney General of Minnesota was meeting with law enforcement in the outstate area. I don't know if it was, no?
I haven't heard that.
Okay, I was wondering if there is coordination between you know, police and the attorney general, and then how you would see the differences between the metro area and here, and the pros and cons of trying to, maybe you kind of touched on it, you know, knowing people, but your view of the difference between, we hear all the big headlines and what's here.
Sure, well, I don't know of any meetings in the immediate future with the Attorney General, but I can tell you that, you know, when you see the headlines of, you know, all the changes for public safety and law enforcement that are talked about up in the metro, that does trickle down to us down here. And a lot of the changes in laws and the ways that we have to operate, unfortunately, come because of the metro agencies. And then we just have to deal with them the best that we can. That's always been an argument of mine, and I can't change laws or legislation. Certainly our association, we do that through the Sheriff's Association, to make some of those changes, but personally as the sheriff, I cannot do that.
Mark?
I can tell you most cops are not happy with our Attorney General. And the number one reason why is if we're involved in an officer-involved shooting, they want all cases to be sent to the Attorney General's office to decide whether or not you should be charged for the crime. That is the job of the local county attorney in the county that you're from. It always has been. They're elected, and they should be judged. And I want to be judged by the residents of Nicollet County who I provide a service for, not individuals up in the cities. And that's probably the number one issue with as far as frontline law enforcement officers is who should be reviewing that particular case. We want the BCA, an independent agency, to review to see if the officers that are involved did something wrong. And the Attorney General's office, they want them to have their own investigators and do all law enforcement related shootings, and then decide whether or not charges should be coming. And a lot of county attorneys would be happy for that. They'd be happy to take that off their plate and not have to make that decision, because it's a tough decision. And they may not try that case here. That county attorney may ask another jurisdiction, Blue Earth County, or another county attorney if we have that incident take place, but they still are vested because they made the decision on where to send that case. So with what's taken place recently with officers being charged has resulted in some agencies not responding to individuals that are suicidal. So if you're home alone and you're suicidal, now if I show up there and you can't shoot yourself and you aim a gun at me and I shoot you, now I could go to jail. And some agencies just won't go. If you're home alone and there's nobody else in the home, or you're not threatening your neighbors, they're saying, let's try calling you and talking with you. But that law enforcement, just by being there, may cause the problem. And so now we have agencies across the state that have different protocols. Some show up, some are not showing up. And we have that right here in our own county, where we don't have the same procedures. And now if I show up and this particular city says, yeah, we don't respond to them, we need to be on the same page. But that's my only thing with Keith Ellison's office and the Attorney General. It's a very powerful position, and those are big decisions that has never been made before. Those cases have always been reviewed by an elected county attorney on whether or not a criminal act took place or negligence on behalf of the officer.
All right, so I'm sure that both of these candidates are happy to meet and talk with you after the forum, but I want to give them each 1 minute to give us their closing pitch, and then we'll thank them for their time. So Sheriff Lang, let's start with you.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for showing up here tonight, and for Amy putting this event together. Again, it's been an honor for me to be the sheriff of Nicollet County for the past 20 years, and I think with the changing technologies that have come into place, that I've done a lot to keep up with the changing technologies. Our staff has grown. We separated the jail and dispatch function in 2009 to provide a better dispatching service to the residents, and then we took on dispatching for North Mankato. I also am proud of the fact that we increased our patrol deputies, to give not only the officers that backup that they need out there, but better, service to the residents of the county as well. One thing that I think, since we're here at Gustavus, you know, there's a lot of discussion about, the sheriff's office response to Gustavus. You know, what do we do?
We're not cutting you off there.
As far as what the sheriff's office solely does with Gustavus, in all reality, the sheriff's main contact with Gustavus is a support role to the local PD. I mean, you have campus security here to attend to your day-to-day needs. The local police department is responsible for any reports of criminal activity or other events that occur on campus, and the sheriff's office is basically a support role for the local PD to call us up here. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us, and the only thing I would say with that is if there's an incident on campus, there may be 2 cops working St. Peter, and there's probably 2 deputies on, and you're just as likely to get a deputy at Gustavus as you are a police officer from the city of St. Peter. It doesn't, I mean, we're in town all the time and respond to calls with the police department. But as far as our closing, they've done a lot of good things for Nicollet County. You know, I've worked under him for 20 years. But there's things that we can do better. We can do better in transparency, we can do better with training, and if you Google my name, you'll see the amount of cases. I've been a jailer, I've been a dispatcher, I've been a deputy sheriff, I've done serious crimes and investigations for the last 16 years. Okay, I've done all those different roles, and as a result of that, deputies have seen the work that I've done, how I've treated people. The deputies have endorsed me as a candidate. Okay, that doesn't happen very often, where they go against the sitting sheriff and endorse another candidate. But they've chosen to endorse me, and I'm honored by that endorsement. Dave's done a good job, and I ain't saying he's a good person. I'm not saying he hasn't, but I think we can do better at the sheriff's department. It's time for some new ideas, a new direction, because things, honestly, are you safer now than you were 5 years ago? Do you feel safer? Are things better in your community? Are drugs and violent crime and things seem upside down? Because I think almost every aspect, things are not going the right direction. We need to do our job at the jail, but we need to advocate on behalf of citizens, with our legislature, with our other elected officials. And honestly, if our county attorney, if our judges aren't doing what we think is appropriate, then I think that we need to call them out on that and say, we're doing our part. We're under a microscope every day. If I do something wrong, I'll be in the paper tomorrow. Not very often do you see where judges are held accountable for their actions and letting repeat criminals out of jail. So I appreciate you guys being here, and I thank Gustavus for having us.
Well, thank you both for being here. Let's give a round of applause to the rest of our guests.